My name is John Passfield, and I'm going to read from my novel about Pompeii. I'm calling this video Pompeii Video 2, Pliny, the Eruption, AD 79. So that's the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, of course. Here's the cover of the novel. I'll just hold it up. Pompeii, Vesuvius Dominus, a novel by John Passfield. The illustration is quite striking. It's by James Wright, an Englishman, who painted this in the 1770s. Now, he, of course, was not an eyewitness. He lived 1700 years after the event, but he responded creatively, artistically, by creating a painting, his impression of what happened on that day. I've done the same. I've responded creatively, artistically, by writing a novel, Pompeii, Vesuvius Dominus. Let me read from the summary on the back cover of the novel. Here's what happened. On the afternoon of AD 79, a white cloud appears above Mount Vesuvius and begins to deposit a layer of ash on the nearby town of Pompeii. Gradually, the people of Pompeii become aware that an awesomely destructive natural force has unleashed its full fury against the lives that they have established in their community. As they are swept up in the destructive experience, three people consider the premises by which they have been living their lives. So the small world is the world of community, the world of family, the world of interpersonal relationships. We all hope that that goes smoothly. We make plans and hopefully these plans are fulfilled. But the larger world sometimes has major events that impinge on those small communities, those personal relationships. And Pompeii is so memorable in human history as an event that has become mythical, has become typical of all of these major events that somehow sweep away the petty cares of human beings, I guess you could say. The structure of the novel is this. I made a Romeo and Juliet story out of the historical elements. I didn't really change anything, but I added a few things. Pliny and Julia are both 17 years old. In the summer of AD 78, the summer before the summer of destruction, they had a summer love affair. It was an arranged marriage. They didn't really want to meet each other, but they did fall in love. It looked perfect at the time. But then his uncle and her father had a falling out, decided that they didn't want to arrange this particular marriage. So in the summer of AD 79, these two 17-year-old kids are forbidden to see each other. Well, as the destruction happens, each chapter contains the many levels of thought in the mind of these two characters, Pliny and Julia. They each, of course, in the most conscious level of their minds, are responding to the volcanic explosion. It's gradual at first, just a layer of soft ash, like a nice layer of snow in southern Ontario. How nice it looks. But gradually it becomes more and more, they become more and more aware that something ominous is happening. So they're reacting to that on the surface of their minds. And that's what I'm going to read today, the action passages from the novel. But they also remember the progress of their love affair of the summer before and how they've been forbidden to meet this summer. So Pliny and Julia are being kept apart. Pliny, who I'm going to focus on in this video, is watching the eruption from across the bay and trying not to think about Julia. As the earthquake on their side of the bay gets worse, Pliny takes his mother away from their collapsing villa. So that's really the Pliny story here. But the overriding story is how much destruction is there in the town of Pompeii across the bay. And the personal story is, will Julia survive? Will we ever get to marry? So let's go right into the reading then. Chapter 2, Pliny 1, is on page 7. I'll just find it here. And here's what happens to Pliny. Chapter 2, Pliny the Younger 1. A white cloud in the sky above Pompeii. Mother calling down something about a cloud. Early afternoon, busy at my books, sunny with a pleasant breeze, perfect day. Section of Livy with notes on legal matters and some extracts from the naval material which Uncle asked me to prepare for him. Books in the morning, then sun, cold bath, lunch with mother and uncle, and now back to the books. Must be about 1 o'clock. Mother calling to uncle and me, calling and waving her arms, waving and saying something about a cloud in the sky in the direction of Pompeii. Uncle asking, what in the world is your mother upset about now? So it doesn't seem very important at first. That's the most conscious level of Pliny's thoughts. A little deeper down, possibly even subconscious, because he's trying to fight off these thoughts. Thoughts of Julia. Pompeii, a little town across the bay. First place the sailors head to when they're on leave. Pompeii, the last place I want to stare at in the heat of an August afternoon. I'd rather be shivering on guard duty against the barbarians in the furthest outpost in Britain than to spend my time even thinking about Pompeii. Well, he's had a love affair with Julia the previous year, and now he's forbidden to see her. So to go to Pompeii at the behest of his uncle, who wants to go over and have a look, is the last thing he would want to do. Now, his uncle is Pliny the Elder. He's basically the head of the Roman navy based at Misenum across the bay from Pompeii. And so he can order ships to go over and have a look and see if they can do something to help if there's any trouble over there. Yeah, he's also what we'd call a naturalist, I guess, a natural historian. We would call him an amateur now because he didn't have the scientific methods we have. But he wrote books, and you can read them still, about all kinds of natural phenomena that he found so interesting. So, gee, something happening over in Pompeii? Let's go over and have a look. Pliny? No thanks, Uncle. I'd rather not go. So this chapter has a number of action sequences, but I'm skipping over to the very last one in chapter 2, Pliny 1. Uncle bustling about as a fast Liburnian is made ready, sailors swarming over the dock and loading provisions, others manning the oars and readying the rigging. Uncle shouting out to the captain and dictating notes to his scribe as he glances up at the cloud. I realize that Livy will keep, Uncle, but the cloud is not as important to me as it is to you. Natural history is not my field. And keep Mother company. She is obviously disturbed. And if I get those extracts done today, if I stay the course, suddenly a shout, a messenger approaching by sea, a message from Rectina. Uncle, he is shouting that he is from Rectina. Her villa would be right beneath. Perhaps he can tell us more about the cloud. So that's the end of chapter 2, which is Pliny 1. And now we move to chapter 6, which is Pliny the Younger 2. A message for Gaius Plinius Secundus, that's Pliny the Elder. A message from Rectina. She is trapped in her villa. There's a rain of ash from the big white cloud. She is afraid to leave her home. There's no escape except by coast. Her husband, why, he's at Bay. The debris? A fine white powder. Everyone in the area is afraid and calls for rescue. Rectina said that I should speak directly to you. Uncle swiftly changing his orders. Ready the warships, every one. The coast is thickly populated. There will be many who will want relief. Well, nephew, you see how this phenomenon grows and grows? Not too late to change your mind. The excitement of the chase. You'll regret missing out on this day, you can be sure. So Pliny the Elder, realizing some of these older people are getting worried, readies the warships to go over. More ships to take people off the coast near Pompeii. But still not thinking it was all that terrible. It's going to be very interesting for him, and he thinks it would be interesting for young Pliny to go as well. So off they go. And now leaving out a lot of action on Pliny's part and moving to chapter 10, Pliny the Younger 3. Awakened with a shock. Are the walls swaying, or is it a dream that I am having? Darkness in the room, looking around for a ray of light and waiting for my eyes to adjust. No one in the peristyle. Should I call out for a servant? I don't hear Mother at all. I wonder what time it is. The shock of Uncle going to Pompeii has started me dreaming. It's probably nothing at all. Why would I wake up in a sweat and wonder where I am and what has happened if I was not having a dream about Pompeii? What do I care what happens there? Better to lie down and go to sleep again. Well, it's not because he's indifferent to suffering. He doesn't think there is any suffering in Pompeii. But it's because Julia's there, the girl he's forbidden to see. Here's some thoughts a little deeper down in his mind. How can she enjoy life in Pompeii? How can she cheerfully prepare for a wedding with one who is so inscrutable? Well, that's another young fellow who her father is arranging a marriage with. How can she order flowers for the tables, hire musicians for the feast, select the wine for the libations, and not think once of me? Does she not live underneath the same cloud that is formed over me? Well, very human, to kind of ignore the big problems of the world, which not very clear is a big problem with Pompeii, but and concentrate on your own small problems, the own small cloud over your head, And that's what Pliny is doing now. It's very, very gradual. He was across the bay in Misenum with his mother, and not sure what was happening in Pompeii. Let's go to chapter 14, Pliny 4. Again, leaving out a lot of information. Page 119, just trying to find my page here as I talk. Leaving out a lot of information that's in that chapter about Pliny and his reaction. Here's chapter 14, Pliny the Younger 4. Dawn, the light is dim and faint. Walking along the road that leads away from Uncle's villa, mother leaning on my arm, leaving the naval docks and walking along the road that hugs the shore. We finally had to leave. The buildings were tottering. Mother was terrified. The open space was too small to keep us safe if the house had collapsed. A dense crowd is surging behind us, pushing us forward. Once I gave the order to leave, the household servants rushed away from their posts. Many are panic-stricken. I keep telling Mother that there's no danger, but it is dark, and the cries of the frightened people are hard to dismiss. It's one thing to tell old stories of mild earthquakes, and another to wake to the walls of your villa swaying in the dark. And then at a little deeper level of his mind, more thoughts of Julia. If it weren't for her parents and my uncle, we could get married. We could be partners in a distinguished public career. I would probably choose the law if I had complete freedom to choose, and I would choose Julia to be my partner in every endeavor. Well, his uncle, Pliny the Elder, his guardian, is choosing for him to marry someone else in future, not arranged yet, but to not marry Julia at all, and for him to go into politics in the Senate rather than to go into law. So here's a 17-year-old in AD 79 thinking that his problems are pretty big when there are larger problems for his society. As he's becoming aware, he's leading his mother away from the villa because if it collapses, they'll be underneath. Let's go to chapter 18 in Pliny 5, again, leaving out a lot of action sequences. This is page 157. Chapter 18 in Pliny the Younger 5. The black clouds sinking down to the earth, covering the sea, blotting out Capri, hiding the promontory of Misenum from sight. Mother imploring me to escape. I command you. You are young. I am old. You can escape much better without me. I am content to die in peace. Don't let me be the cause of your being caught in this disaster. Please go while you can. Leave me behind. So it was completely dark, of course, from the cloud of ash covering the landscape all the way over to Misenum. They left the villa. They're fleeing on the road. The mother thinks it's getting worse, which it is, and suggests that Pliny just take off on his own and not move along slowly with her. Further down in his thoughts, really conflicted, we would say. My uncle is grooming me for public service in Rome. He is truly a wonderful person to have taken my mother and me in and given us the benefit of all that he has accomplished in his life. When my father died, my mother was in despair. Surely Julia and I can be polite each time we meet in the future. They say that time is all that takes for wounds to heal. I should put the past behind me and think of my career. So it was a different time perhaps than it is now, though we still have societies where a parental vision for one's life is very important and not easy to cast off. We have so many novels and films where the young people just chuck the old people and their corny old ideas and go off on their own. But not always that easy. So he is conflicted. He's trying hard to accept the situation of being banned from seeing Julia and somehow accept his uncle's ideas for his life and his future. Let's go to chapter, whoops. Now let's go to chapter 22, Pliny the Younger, 6. The worst is over. Daylight is returning, but dim and yellow like the light of an eclipse. People are rising as from the dead, pushing off their hoods and looking around, covered in shrouds of ash, rising to sitting and standing postures, blinking and trying to see. I reach down and help others to gain their feet. Gradually, daylight is returning. The darkness is thinning and dispersing into smoke or cloud. And then thinking of Julia. Amid this terrible disaster, this chaos, the mind keeps working at various levels. I've only seen her twice since our last meeting in Pompeii, both times in Rome. The first time was at the Circus Maximus. I swept my glance around the crowd, and my heart stopped. There she was, sitting with some friends. Her father was regaling the crowd with his gestures and his smiles. The last time we met was on the street corner in the winter, on what had to be the coldest, darkest day. She looked so beautiful in her robe, the brightest blue. We met to say goodbye at my request. Since then, we have not exchanged a word. Well, let's go to leaving out again a number of action sequences, but go to the very last of the Pliny chapters, the last of the action sequences. The damage is unbelievable here. What have other cities suffered? Mother and I in prayer, pouring libations on the ground. We pray to the gods that Uncle will be safe. We pray that others have survived as well. Rectina and Tascius and others of our friends. We throw ourselves on the mercy of the gods. I kept my fears from Mother. I tried to keep my calm. The worst was terrifying. I came to think that this disturbance was the end of the world. Who would have thought that we would be alive? No doubt there will soon be news of Herculaneum and Pompeii. Perhaps the people there escaped the worst. Perhaps the warning signs were clear. Perhaps the people all got away. No doubt the physical damage is extensive, but perhaps the human toll will be light. Perhaps we will sight my uncle's sail at any time. Well, at the most conscious level, he's thinking of people in general, not Julia in particular, and his uncle in particular. But maybe deeper down, he's really hoping that Julia has survived. But of course, if Julia survives and her father survives and he hasn't changed his mind, there won't be a marriage. If Julia survives and her father doesn't, well, who knows? There's always hope, I guess. A final image, though, not in a Pliny chapter, but in a straight image of the volcano in the town chapter. A young man comforting his aging mother, returning to their villa amid smoldering fires, waiting for his uncle to come home. So Pliny the younger has escaped a disaster. We know that from the historical record. In fact, it was he later who recorded the date and the time in a letter to Tacitus, the historian, and that helped sort of pin down. But then after they started to dig deeper into Pompeii, all kinds of evidence of the day and the time of this disaster, and of course all the events of the disaster, as we see when we examine all of the evidence, are all clear to us now. But Pliny was the first to kind of put it into historical context. So that's the reading from the text. I'll make a conclusion in a moment. Now, as a kind of conclusion, here's a passage from one of my notes. I keep notes as I write books. I'll talk about those in a moment. Today, I'm going to start the full-time writing of a novel, which I'm going to call Pompeii, Vesuvius, Dominus. The idea for a novel on the topic of the destruction of Pompeii in AD 79 came to me about 2 weeks after visiting the town of Pompeii. Fascinating to walk through Roman streets 2,000 years after the people themselves were walking through those streets, and that gave me the idea for the novel, at least the initial idea. Though the visit to Pompeii was the initial stimulus, I believe that the idea of a novel on this topic came to me as a natural development of the kind of novel that I've been developing over the course of my novel writing and theory developing career. The concept of the carrying on of the everyday lives and cares of a small group of people who are surrounded by forces, both man made and natural, over which they have limited or no control, is a natural for me, as I believe this journal will demonstrate as the project evolves towards a novel length idea pattern embodiment of my original idea. So we're in the midst of a pandemic right now. This is 2020 as I read. COVID-19 is assaulting the world, really. But I wrote the novel before that happened, so I wasn't thinking of COVID-19. But I was born in 1945, halfway through the 20th century. My parents and grandparents had lived through the First World War, the Great Depression, the Worldwide Depression, and the Second World War. So I was aware of people in my family and people that my family had been connected with whose lives were disrupted by these larger world level events that just came in and disrupted or destroyed the lives of people trying to live their lives on an everyday basis. So I was well aware of that. Also, I was a young person during the Vietnam War. Being Canadian, I wasn't expected to go, but very, very aware of the news from the United States just across the border, 20 miles away from my home across Lake Erie, of young people my age being conscripted and sent to Vietnam. Now, whatever one's opinions on the Vietnam War, whether it was a good war or a foolish war to fight, there were people going over, being maimed, being destroyed, and their families being disrupted and destroyed in service to that war, the Vietnam War. So it was a very kind of a standard concept in my mind as I've moved through my novel writing career. So that's from my journal. The book, once again, is Pompeii, Vesuvius Dominus, a novel by John Passfield. It's available on Amazon if you'd wish to buy it. If you go to my website, which is johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca, there's 2 free books there. One is a planning notebook, in which I simply start with the idea, do the research, structure the novel, and then write the novel. And the other is a journal in which I polish the novel and write of all kinds of topics that the writing of the novel has suggested to me. So they're both available for free if you just go to my website and click on notebooks and click on journals and then go down to the Pompeii icon. So lastly, I would just like to say thank you for watching this video.